Monday's episode of Days of Our Lives may look, at first glance, like a quieter chapter compared to the larger chaos building across Salem. But the deeper you look, the more this episode feels like a pressure point, the kind of installment where emotional damage, hidden motives, and private realizations start shifting the story in ways that may not be obvious until later. Because this is not just an episode about people talking. What makes Monday interesting is that almost every major scene seems to revolve around one central idea. Someone knows more than they are saying, and someone else is getting closer to finding out. So let's break it all down, because this episode may be doing much more setup for the future than it first appears. Let's begin with Leo, because his material on Monday may carry more emotional significance than the spoiler first suggests. At a glance, Marlena helps Leo make a breakthrough. Sounds like a familiar soap beat. A troubled character sits down, opens up, and leaves with a little more clarity. But with Leo, it is rarely that simple. A breakthrough for him usually does not come in the form of peace. It comes when the performance starts cracking and the truth underneath becomes too painful to keep avoiding. Leo recently got Dimitri to be the bigger man in the divorce settlement, and Dimitri did that largely because of what he still felt for Leo. So from Dimitri's point of view, Leo's emotional hesitation afterward likely felt cruel, manipulative, or even calculated. But what makes the situation more layered is that Leo may not have been playing a game at all. He may have been doing what he often does when emotions become too real, pulling back, losing clarity, and reacting from fear rather than intention. Because if Leo was not trying to deceive Dimitri, then Dimitri's anger becomes even more damaging in a different way. It stops being a punishment for manipulation and starts becoming an attack on wounds Leo may already carry. And judging from the spoiler, Dimitri's words seem to hit exactly there, in the place where Leo's oldest insecurities still live. That is why Marlena's role feels so important in this episode. She may not simply be helping Leo process a breakup or romantic disappointment. She may be helping him confront the emotional pattern underneath all of it, the need to stay clever, stay protected, stay in control, and never let anyone see how deeply rejection actually affects him. Leo is very good at turning pain into style. He can make sarcasm sound like confidence and theatricality sound like power. But those defenses only work until someone says the one thing he cannot easily laugh off. So Monday may matter because Leo could be pushed into a moment of real self-recognition. Not just, I am hurt, but, I keep ending up here for a reason. And that is a much more serious realization. If that happens, then this breakthrough may not feel uplifting at all. It may feel uncomfortable, exposing, even a little devastating. But that is often when a character becomes most interesting, not when they win the emotional argument, but when they finally lose the ability to hide from themselves. As Leo turns inward, Javi's story brings a different kind of tension, quieter on the surface, but potentially just as important. Javi runs into Rafe in Horton Town Square, and very quickly it becomes clear that his return is going to raise questions. Not just for Rafe, but for Gabby too. That alone gives the scene weight, because it suggests Javi already understands how his reappearance will be interpreted before anyone even says it out loud. And honestly, the assumption would be obvious. When someone with that kind of emotional history suddenly returns to Salem, people are naturally going to wonder if Leo is the reason. That unfinished connection is still part of the air around both of them. So the fact that Javi apparently feels the need to set the record straight tells us something important. He may be trying to regain control of the story before other people write it for him. Because Javi may not simply be clarifying his intentions. He may be drawing a line between who he was when he left and who he is now. Monday's episode could be using that conversation to establish that Javi is no longer defined by what almost happened with Leo, or by the emotional chaos Dimitri helped create. He may be arriving with more self-awareness, more boundaries, and a stronger sense of what he is not willing to step back into. But Salem rarely allows that kind of clean reset. The moment Dimitri spots Javi in Horton Town Square, the emotional equation changes. That detail may seem small, but it has the potential to destabilize everything around Leo very quickly. Dimitri is not likely to view Javi's presence as neutral, especially after everything that has already happened. If he senses unfinished business, renewed tension, or even the possibility of Leo being pulled emotionally in another direction, then his reaction could complicate the situation fast. That is what makes Javi's return feel so effective from a storytelling perspective. He may come back trying to provide clarity, but clarity in a soap rarely ends the mess. More often, it sharpens it. It gives everyone a clearer view of what is unresolved, who is threatened, and where the next emotional collision may come from. So even if Javi intends to calm assumptions and close certain doors, Monday may be doing the opposite underneath the surface. It may be reopening emotional territory that nobody involved has fully moved past. And that is why his return could matter more than it first appears. Elsewhere in Salem, Monday may deliver one of the episode's most emotionally layered moments through Stephanie. At first, the spoiler sounds familiar. Stephanie is frustrated, Alex tries to help, and she blows up. But the more important detail may be the reason behind that reaction. This does not feel like ordinary irritation, and it does not feel like the kind of anger that comes from a simple disagreement between two people who are out of sync. It feels more fragile than that. If Stephanie lashes out, the scene may be less about temper and more about emotional overload. Trauma often changes the way a person receives even well-meaning support. What looks like comfort to one person can feel like pressure to another. What sounds like concern can land like emotional crowding. So Alex may walk into this situation believing he is being steady and supportive, while Stephanie experiences that same energy as something she cannot manage in the moment. Alex may not be failing because he does not care. He may be failing because he is approaching Stephanie as if this is a problem he can help solve, when what she is actually dealing with may still be raw, unresolved, and too immediate to handle neatly. In that kind of emotional state, people do not always respond to love with gratitude. Sometimes they respond with defensiveness, distance, or anger simply because they are already operating from a place of internal strain. Stephanie has already acknowledged that Jeremy understands her in a way others may not, precisely because they went through the same nightmare. That kind of connection can become powerful very quickly, not necessarily because romance is suddenly blooming, but because shared trauma creates a form of recognition that is difficult to replicate. Jeremy may not have better answers than Alex, but he may feel safer to Stephanie simply because he does not need her to explain the emotional damage. That imbalance could become a real issue. Because if Alex keeps trying to reach Stephanie and Jeremy naturally becomes the person she feels most understood by, then the threat to the relationship may not come from cheating or betrayal in the usual sense. It may come from emotional displacement, the slow, dangerous shift that happens when one person becomes associated with pressure and another becomes associated with relief. With Joy also set to return soon, the emotional structure around this story may become even shakier. So Monday may not be the moment everything falls apart, but it could absolutely be the moment the cracks become impossible to ignore. Theo's material on Monday may appear quieter than the rest of the episode, but it could easily become one of the most important threads moving forward. The spoiler simply says that Chanel questions Theo. But on Days of Our Lives, scenes like that are rarely just about curiosity. They are usually about instinct. And Chanel's instinct may be telling her that Theo is not just distracted or uncomfortable, he is hiding something. That distinction matters, because once Chanel senses secrecy, the conversation stops being casual. It becomes pressure. Even if Theo tries to stay calm, The fact that Chanel is asking questions means the truth is already under stress. Secrets are most dangerous not when they are first created, but when someone close enough starts noticing the inconsistencies around them. And Theo may be in exactly that position now. What makes the scene more compelling is the possibility that Chanel is not only reacting to Theo himself. She may also be picking up on the broader atmosphere around him. The spoiler hints that Paulina is keeping a secret too, which creates a second layer of tension. If Chanel starts noticing that Theo's guarded behavior and Paulina's silence seem connected, then she may begin building a picture faster than anyone expects. That is where the danger expands. Because if Theo is protecting information that leads back to EJ, then Chanel is not just stepping into family drama. She may be stepping into a much more dangerous power structure. EJ is not the kind of character who tolerates exposure easily. If he believes someone is getting too close to a truth that threatens his control, his reputation, or his larger plans, he does not simply stand back and hope the problem disappears. On the surface, it is just Chanel pressing Theo. Underneath, it may be the first sign that a protected secret is beginning to slip out of safe hands. And once that starts happening in Salem, the fallout rarely stays limited to the original people involved. What makes this even more intriguing is the long-term implication for Chanel and Johnny. Since their eventual exit is already hanging over the story, this scene may not be important only for Monday. It may be laying emotional and narrative groundwork for why they ultimately decide to leave. So this may not just be a moment of suspicion. It may be the opening movement of a much bigger unraveling, one where Theo feels cornered, Chanel gets closer to the truth, and EJ's world becomes just a little harder to control. So overall, Monday, April 13th may be one of those episodes that works quietly, but dangerously. Leo may finally be forced to face the truth about himself. Javi may return with explanations, only to stir fresh complications anyway. Stephanie's emotional instability may reveal a deeper fracture in her connection with Alex. And Theo may find himself under pressure at the exact moment secrecy is becoming harder to maintain. What ties all of this together is not one big public explosion. It is the growing sense that Salem is filling up with conversations that look personal on the surface, but may carry much larger consequences underneath. And those are often the episodes that end up mattering most. Because on days of our lives, the biggest turning points do not always begin with a scream or a scandal. Sometimes they begin with a therapy session, a tense reunion, one wrong question, or one person finally realizing that the truth is getting too close. So which storyline are you watching most closely on Monday? Leo's breakthrough, Stephanie's struggle, Javi's return, or Chanel pressing Theo for answers? Let me know in the comments, and stay tuned, because if Monday is laying this much emotional groundwork, the fallout later in the week may be even bigger than it looks right now.